A few weeks ago, just before Computex 2025, Intel reached out and said, do you fancy looking at some budget processors? And I thought, I don't really know. Do I? To put this in context, I didn't review their 14th gen Raptor Lake processors. I instead looked at them as part of a roundup with some Gigabyte motherboards. And then when Arrow Lake Core Ultra 200S arrived, initially it was an absolute disaster, and eventually we got round to doing reviews this year, and we weren't massively impressed. While I quite liked the previous gen Core i5-14600K, I don't think much of the new Core Ultra 5 245K, but we live in a state of constant change. So okay Intel, send me a budget processors and I'll see what I think. We have 5 processors in front of us. 2 of them are Raptor Lake, 3 of them are Arrow Lake. They are i5 and Ultra 5 respectively. We could almost think of them as 5 5s, although that might get a little bit complicated. On the Raptor Lake side of things, we have the Core i5-14600K we've previously looked at, and we now have the Core i5-14400F. A typical price for the Core i5-14600K at the moment is £215, but if you head over to Amazon you can find it for £188. It has 6 P cores and 8 E cores, and a TDP of 125 watts. By contrast, the Core i5-14400F, the F means it doesn't have a graphics core, sells for £119. It has 6 P cores and 4 E cores, and a TDP of 65 watts. And when we look at the specifications of the 2 processors side by side, we can see the difference in core counts and thread counts, and as you'd expect, the i5-14400F also runs considerably slower than the i5-14600K. Moving on to Arrow Lake, we have the Ultra 5 245K that we've previously reviewed. We also have here the Ultra 5 235 and the Ultra 5 225F. F again meaning no graphics core. The Ultra 5 245K can be found online at £282, but dig around and you'll find it for under £250. This processor has 6 P cores and 8 E cores, but it does not have hyperthreading, so 6 plus 8 equals 14 threads. TDP is 125 watts. The Ultra 5 235, bizarrely priced at £246, is almost exactly the same price as the 245K. It also has 6 P cores and 8 E cores with 14 threads, but is limited to 65 watts. And then the Ultra 5 225F is priced at £216. It has 6 P cores and 4 E cores, so a total of 10 threads, and is also 65 watts. When we look at the 3 Arrow Lake processors side by side, we see they each have the same number of P cores. There's some variation in E cores. There's also a different NPU or AI rating. As we'd expect, the difference in TDP rating also impacts clock speeds, and the result is that we can expect these 3 processors to behave quite differently to each other. The subject of pricing is going to crop up more than occasionally in this conversation, but the similarity in pricing between the Ultra 5 245K and this Ultra 5 235 makes absolutely no sense to me. But let's park that thought for the moment and talk about testing platforms. Intel addressed this point when they emailed us to discuss these processors. Our Core Ultra 5 series allows both content creators and gamers to get the best value for money under a £500 budget. Combined with a B860 board and DDR5 5600, the Core Ultra 5 225F with 6 performance and 4 efficiency cores offers competitive application and gaming performance, plus similar platform features and AI capabilities versus AMD's Ryzen 5 9600X. This is all for the same price at less than €450. Euros? We're British. With 16 gigabytes of memory, or less than €500 with 32 gigabytes of memory. For audiences focusing on price performance, the Core i5-14400F, 6 P cores plus 4 E cores on a B660 or B760 board with DDR4 3200 memory is the best entry mainstream option in the market at roughly £300, and the 300 would cover a motherboard motherboard, memory and processor. And you can see a huge variation in prices. So for example, Gigabyte B760 DS3H, which supports Raptor Lake, is a DDR4 motherboard that sells for under £110. Or this Asus ROG Strix Z790F gaming Wi-Fi, which supports DDR5 memory for Raptor Lake, sells for £350. And when you move up to Arrow Lake Core Ultra 200S motherboards, the ASRock B860 Pro A Wi-Fi is £153, while the MSI MPG Z890 Carbon Wi-Fi is £456. And when it comes to memory, 32GB of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 3200 retails for under £50, while 48GB of Corsair Vengeance RGB CU DIMMs, which is DDR5 8400, is £330. And of course you need to allow some money for a graphics card. £300 is entry level, £400 gets you something worth having, £500 is looking good, and £600 for a graphics card is surely beyond the scope of somebody buying a budget processor.
With 20 years of PC manufacturing experience, CyberPower PC are the best in the business. With the largest range of parts available in the UK, our team of experienced builders will expertly build and test each system to be delivered to you the very next day. Check out cyberpowersystem.co.uk.
This is where we run into a fundamental difference between people reviewing a range of processors, i.e. me, and someone building a one-off budget PC which uses a particular combination of parts that has to do a certain job. The parts I'm using cover an array of processors. So for example, I'm using this Seasonic Focus GX1000 power supply because I'm powering processors up to Ryzen 9 9950X and also Core Ultra 9 285K. Similarly, when I'm reviewing AMD processors, I would happily test this Ryzen 5 9600X with box cooler. The cooler I actually used was this Fantex Glacier 1 360D30, 360mm AIO and 30mm thick 120 fans. The motherboard I use for Intel 14th Gen, which is complete overkill for Core i5 processors, is this Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Master X. And I'm allying that with some G-Skill DDR5 6800 memory. For the Intel Core Ultra 200S processors, this MSI Mag B860 Tomahawk Wi-Fi, which I reviewed a few weeks ago. But the memory, which is complete overkill for these processors, is some G-Skill Trident Z5CK. CU DIMMs rated at DDR5 8200. And the reason I've used this hardware, which is complete overkill for these budget processors, is that while I've re-benchmarked these 5 CPUs with 2 graphics cards, come to those in a second, it means that I can dredge up some recent data for a whole bunch of other processors which I have not retested. So we've got 14th gen processors, Core Ultra 200 processors, and also AMD Ryzen 9000 processors. When it comes to graphics, I've been using this MSI RTX 4090 Ventus 3X in recent times, but that really is overkill for these processors. So I've also used this Intel Arc B580. Let's start with a look at how the 3 Core Ultra 5 processors behave in Blender. First, we have the Core Ultra 5 245K. This is rated at 125 watts base power, 159 watts turbo power. However, the default power profile in the motherboard is 159 watts continuous. And we can see the P cores run at 5 GHz and the E cores at 4.6 GHz. CPU power draw 140 watts. Next we have the Core Ultra 5 235, which has the same core configuration as the Core Ultra 5 245K, but a 65 watt TDP. The base power is 65 watts and it turbos to 121 watts maximum, but doesn't quite get there in practice. During turbo, the P cores run at 4.8 GHz and the E cores at 4.4 GHz. When the power pulls back to 65 watts, the P cores run at 3.8 GHz and the E cores at 3.3 GHz. And then we have the Core Ultra 5 225F with 6 P cores and a mere 4 E cores. This only turbos to 95 watts, and in this phase the P cores run at 4.7 GHz and the E cores at 4.4 GHz, very similar to the Core Ultra 5 235. However, when running at 65 watts continuous, the P cores run at 4.0 GHz and the E cores at 3.7 GHz, which is faster than the Core Ultra 5 235, presumably because it still has 65 watts of power and fewer cores to share the power between. Our first chart is Cinebench 2024 Multicore. The 5 blue bars represent the 5 Intel processors that we're featuring. The 2 red bars, Ryzen 5 9600X and Ryzen 7 9700X, to give a bit of context. And we can see the Core Ultra 5 245K beats the Core i5 14600K by a narrow margin, but we already knew that. Further down, the Core Ultra 5 235 trails by a reasonable percentage, and right at the bottom we have the Core Ultra 5 225F, and the Core i5 1400F is dead last. These figures are exactly what we'd expect to see judging from the specifications and the clock speeds, and there are no surprises here. Cinebench 2024 single core. AMD leaps up the chart. The Core Ultra 5 245K performs very nicely, and then you'll see behind that we have the Core Ultra 5 235 and the Core Ultra 5 225F. Meanwhile, the Core i5 14600K is third from the bottom, and right at the bottom is the Core i5 14400F. And let's take a look at those Cinebench 2024 multi-core scores divided by pounds per cost. This is purely the cost of the CPU, no other parts of the system have been considered. And the very cheap Core i5 14400F jumps to the top of the charts. A score of 832 points is fairly pathetic, but the cost of £120 is absolutely excellent. And in third place it's the Core i5 14600K. In this chart, Intel is doing quite well, AMD on the other hand is doing less well, and the Ryzen 7 9700X looks like quite poor value, but we said this in our review of that processor. CPU power consumption. Again, power consumption of the processor under load. And we see 3 of the Intel processors right at the top of the charts drawing a mere 65 watts. Behind that we have the 2 AMD processors drawing 88 watts, and then the Core Ultra 5 245K followed by the Core i5 14600K. The difference in power between the Core Ultra 5 245K and the Core i5 14600K is significant. And now let's take the Cinebench 2024 multi-core scores and divide by the power draw for each of the processors. Clear away at the top of the chart we have the Core Ultra 5 235. A distance behind that we have the Core Ultra 5 225F, Ryzen 7 9700X in third place, and the Core i5 14400F in fourth place. Those 65 watt processors do an excellent job. By contrast, the high power draw of the Core i5 14600K makes it look rather poor in this test. And we move on to gaming. Far Cry 6 at 1080p. To make this clear, the 5 blue bands have been retested, all the other data has been reused from recent reviews. Of those 5 Intel processors, the Core i5 14600K does well and reminds us why we like this processor so much. And then the bottom 4 places are held by the other Intel processors. It's not such a shock to see those 65 watt parts down the bottom, but the Core Ultra 5 245K does not do well here. Of course, this chart is using an RTX 4090 graphics card. When we switch over to the ARC B580 graphics card, we see something quite peculiar. Top of the chart is the Core Ultra 5 225F, albeit by a single frame per second. But the 1% lows also look rather good. Second, it's the Core i5 14600K, and then the other 3 processors close behind. What is going on here with the Core Ultra 5 225F? We do not understand. Next, we have Far Cry 6 at 1440p on the RTX 4090, and it's a similar story to 1080p. The Core i5 14600K does okay, the other 4 processors all huddle at the bottom of the chart. And when we switch from the Nvidia graphics card to the ARC B580, once again, inexplicably, the Ultra 5 225F is at the top of the chart. Close behind it's the i5 14600K, and in third place it's the Core i5 14400F. There are very few FPS between these processors. but the results are quite peculiar. Our second game is Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. We're running at 1080p and we're using the RTX 4090. Top of the 5 Intel processors is the Core Ultra 5 245K. Very close behind that we see the i5 14600K. The other processors trail behind by a couple of FPS, but it's very close fought. And you can argue that the Core Ultra 5 235 is actually ahead of the i5 14600K as the 1% loads are so good. Switching over to the Arc B580 graphics card, the results look quite comprehensible. Top of the chart it's the i5 14600K, and then on average it's the i5 14400F right behind it. However, the 1% lows are very low, so you might argue the Ultra 5 235 should be in second place. However you want to argue that, there is no explanation for the Core Ultra 5 245K once again being at the bottom of these Arc B580 charts. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora at 1440p with the RTX 4090 graphics card, Core Ultra 5 245K and Core i5 14600K doing very nicely. Then we have the Ultra 5 225F and the Ultra 5 235F pretty much tied, and the Core i5 14400F is a distance behind. Right at the bottom of the chart we have the two AMD processors. This is legacy data and I think it might deserve a retest. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora at 1440p on the Arc B580 graphics card. Yes, there is some slight differentiation in this chart, but realistically it's a dead heat for all 5 processors. Our third game is Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p on the RTX 4090. We see the Core Ultra 5 245K has the beating of the other processors, and they go in the order we would expect. Core i5 14600K, Core Ultra 5 235, Core Ultra 5 225F, and at the bottom of the stack it's the Core i5 14400F. Cyberpunk 2077 on the Arc B580 graphics. It's more or less a tie for all the processors, but bottom of the stack yet again, and we have no explanation for this. It's the Core Ultra 5 245K. Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440 on the RTX 4090. The best of these budget processors is the Core i5 14600K, followed by the Core Ultra 5 245K. And then the 65 watt processors are all down the bottom of the chart, with the Core i5 14400F at the very bottom. And once again, when we switch over to the Arc B580 graphics, it's pretty much a dead heat, but this time, hallelujah, it's the Core Ultra 225F right at the bottom, and the Core Ultra 5 245K is in the middle of the chart. And having seen those charts, I'm sure you agree that the Core i5 14400F looks impressively cheap, but also comes all too often at the bottom of the charts. The Core Ultra 5 225F and Core Ultra 5 235 look interesting, but you barely get any saving over the Core Ultra 5 245K, and that offers good all-round performance and decent value for money. Even now in the middle of 2025, the Core i5 14600K is still in there and fighting, and this leaves the picture terribly unclear. So I did the obvious thing and I asked the internet what the internet thought, and the internet's response to which budget PC processor should you buy was neither Core i5 14th gen nor Core Ultra 5, but instead was AMD Ryzen 9000. And you might think that that wraps things up neatly, but it doesn't, because somebody has decided to muddy the waters, and that somebody is Intel. Intel quite recently announced significant price cuts for two specific processors, the Core Ultra 7 265K and the Core Ultra 7 265KF, and this has some bizarre ramifications. It means right now you'll pay about £400 for the Intel Core Ultra 7 265 non-K and £380 for the Core Ultra 7 265F, but you'll pay £290 for the Core Ultra 7 265K and £264 for the Core Ultra 7 265KF without graphics. Alternatively, head over to Amazon and you can buy a Core Ultra 7 265K for £267, which is basically the same price as the Core Ultra 5 245K. So let's have a quick look at some charts with the Core Ultra 7 265K highlighted in green. We have the 5 blue bars for the other Intel processors, 1 green bar for Core Ultra 7, and we can see in Cinebench 2024 Multicore, it's Core Ultra 7 265K leading by a large margin. In Cinebench 2024 single core, the Core Ultra 7 265K beats the Core Ultra 5 245K by a very small margin, but a win's a win. Power consumption. This is the Achilles heel of this processor relative to the other processors. Core Ultra 7 265K draws 220 watts under load with this power profile. The Core i5 14600K draws 176 watts. The Core Ultra 5 245K a mere 130 watts. So the 2 extra P cores and 4 extra E cores certainly require a lot of extra power. In gaming, Far Cry 6 at 1080p with the RTX 4090 graphics card, we see the Core Ultra 7 265K beats the Core Ultra 5 245K. However, the Core i5 14600K wins comfortably. And it's the same deal in Far Cry 6 at 1440p. The legacy i5 14600K doing very well, but the Ultra 7 265K also performs nicely. Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p. Core Ultra 7 265K beats all the blue bars, albeit by 5 FPS. The Ultra 5 245K is clearly good enough. The Ultra 7 265K is slightly better. In Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p, the Ultra 7 265K wins, but it's a single FPS on average and a small uplift for the 1% lows. And we come to my conclusions, and they haven't really changed since my review of the 3 Arrow Lake processors back in early February of this year. The platform obviously had a terrible launch last year. Let's put that behind us and move on to the state of play of the processors today. The Ultra 9, which plays no part in this conversation, is an interesting processor but far too expensive. The Ultra 5 245K is a decent processor in its own way, but is just a bit bizarre to my mind. The Ultra 7 is kind of okay, and I recommended it in my review, albeit with some codicils. If you're considering buying the Ultra 5 245K, don't buy the Ultra 7, with the one proviso, which is that the increased power draw might be an issue if you're building a really basic, really cheap PC with a tiny power supply, basic cooler, and a really small case. But I think if you can handle 150 odd watts of CPU power, you can handle 200 odd watts of CPU power. As for these other processors that Intel sent us, the 235 and the 225F, the pricing that Intel has imposed on these processors makes almost no sense to us. I can see that theoretically there's some kind of graduation, £10 and £20 steps between the different SKUs, but for me they are just totally irrelevant. System integrators I can see would list PCs using basic specs of hardware and then upsell you to get a better PC, but I have no use for these processors at all. Meanwhile, Z790 14th gen processors and indeed budget 700 series chipsets certainly have their place. I really did not enjoy the i5 14400F, although I can see at £120 retail, I can see why that's of interest to system integrators. The i5 14600K continues to be a blindingly good processor, albeit its day is nearly past. Sadly, I have to agree with the internet, which is that the processor of choice for enthusiasts comes from AMD, one of their new Zen 5 parts, whether it's a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7. As you know, we adore the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D, but that's clearly a more expensive processor and outside of this conversation. My gaming results with the Intel Arc B580 graphics card were a complete puzzle to me. Very strange results there, but we ran game after game and they came out quite consistently. So please leave your comments below. Do you agree with the internet that the best Intel processor is an AMD processor, or do you think the price cuts to Core Ultra 7 265K gives Intel something of a shout? Please check us out on TikTok and head over to kitguru.net to read our reviews.